After we learned that we are allowed to prepare our dishes on Shabbat only for the next meal and not for the meal after that for Motzei Shabbat, one is not allowed to wash dishes for Motzei Shabbat or for Sunday, only whatever he might use on Shabbat. Although he doesn't need to calculate exactly what he's going to use, he can wash anything that potentially he might use. But when we wash the dishes, we need to be careful with few things. Like, for instance, the obvious thing is when we use a sponge under the water, we squeeze out the water out of the sponge when we clean the dishes, and that's forbidden. You're not allowed to squeeze the sponge full of water on the dishes. It's taking out all the liquid that's in there. Therefore, we need to be careful that once we want to use something to scrub the utensils, we must use something that's not going to hold the water inside. Some have those kind of brushes that the brisks in them don't absorb anything and they're a little bit far apart, and that's fine. Others want to use things that are made out of nylon or plastic that also doesn't absorb the water, and that is also fine. When you're using a Brillo, that's already something that's questionable, because in Shmirat Shabbat Kilchatai brings down that he shines the utensils when you use them, and it rubs it off, and that's under the Isur of Memachek, and one should be careful not to use such a Brillo. But otherwise, all other things will be okay if they don't absorb. When we use the liquid, also, some poskim say one should not use the bar of liquid, and therefore using the detergents on the liquid, on the dishes, that will be absolutely fine. Once we use those things and we're ready to put them away, also, care should be taken not to use any of those things that might come to be the Isur of Borer, which means when you take the forks, let's say, out of the knife mixture, there's knives, forks, let's say there's also spoons, you want to clean first all the forks. Once you do that, you're violating Borer, because you're taking only the forks out of the rovet, out of the mixture of utensils, and you put them away. That's called Borer. Rather, one should take whatever comes to hand without seeing that it should be one utensil over the other, because taking over such a thing and putting it away for afterwards, that's Borer for afterwards, and that's not allowed. So therefore, that's also, one should be careful. You can put it away, and that's without looking at what you take in out of the mixture. When you put it away on the rack, that's fine over there to leave it, and then use it afterwards in the same Shabbat. But if a person wants to dry them, make sure that you don't use a very wet towel to dry them, because when you use a wet towel, again, you're squeezing out. Normally, if a person uses any towel that is not extremely wet, all towels will be okay to use to dry those things if one doesn't want to keep them to dry by itself.